Welcome to Create If Writing, the podcast for writers and creatives dealing with the passion and the practice behind making good art. I'm Kirsten Oliphant, your host, and you can find more at createifwriting.com. I want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of the show, Audible. There's nothing I love more than the feel of a real book in my hands. But that's just not my everyday. Right now, I do a lot more listening as I'm driving around in my car or at the gym or shuffling the kids around the house. Audible provides a great way to listen to your favorite books. With over 180,000 titles, you will find something that you love. To support the show and get a free trial, visit audibletrial.com/createifwriting. Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Create If Writing. I have a confession to make. Maybe two, maybe three confessions. The first confession, though, is that this is the fourth or fifth time I've recorded this episode. Most of the time I'm going to be doing interviews, and I find it really easy to be energized and excited when I'm talking to other people. But I'm sitting here alone in my house. My kids are asleep. My husband's out of town. There's a wonderful thunderstorm going on. I've got a glass of wine, but it's just really hard to sound excited. However, I am excited. I'm very excited about this podcast. I'm very excited about art and creativity and writing and all of these things. I'm also really excited about the practical things that sometimes people aren't as excited about, like platform building and email lists and Twitter. Scary words sometimes to people. But this podcast is going to be dealing with both sides because they're both important, I think. If you want to create art and you want your art to be in front of an audience, then both sides are important. Especially now, I feel like more than ever with the state of this digital world we have in social media where, especially I'm talking now for writers, publishers expect for you to have a platform because anyone can build one. And being sort of entrenched in the blogging world for the past several years, I see bloggers doing this all the time, building their platform. But writers, I feel like, not everybody, I don't want to say that about you, but writers often we struggle with that because we just want to write. We don't want to do this platform thing. And bloggers know that it's already built in. Well, I think writers need to start realizing it also needs to be built in. I am excited about talking about both, and I'm still building all these things for me. I'm still working on my own things. So by no means do I think that starting this podcast means that I have arrived, that I have some kind of knowledge to impart. I just have a lot of excitement, and I have some really cool guests coming up. This year, I have a whole lot of people that I was bold and said, I would love for you to come on, and they said yes. So get excited for people from all walks of creative life and social media life and influencer life and business life. I just have a very random assortment of guests. So I think they will all be helpful. And if to me, there was some sense of value from what they could bring to people who are creative and wanting to create, then I invited them on. And I have some dream guests as well that I'm going to reach out to through Twitter. And we'll see where that goes. But I may ask help from my viewers as well to retweet some things to maybe get some attention from some odd guests that otherwise don't know that I exist. But today I want to start in this very first podcast talking about creativity and talking about passion. And I have to say that the journey to this podcast has been a really weird one because here comes confession number 2. I had not listened to a podcast before 3 weeks ago. Yes, that is correct. 3 weeks ago, I listened to my first podcast. And here's why. There are certain times and ways that I'm kind of on top of what's happening digitally and technology-wise and all those kinds of things. And then there are times where I'm a little bit curmudgeonly and I am the person saying, you people with your newfangled technology, I'm not going to do it. Or that's too hard for me, I don't understand it. And one of those areas that I had a really hard time transferring over was audio, was music especially. I do have an iPod. I do listen to digital media and music, but it really changed the way I listen to things, and it really kind of depresses me, actually, how much it changed the way I listen to music. And I don't really like to listen on my computer. I get very confused when I open up the iTunes interface. And yes, I realize this makes me sound crazy because it's not that hard. However, for me, it was a little bit difficult. And so couple that with the fact that I had the same phone for 4 years that had no memory for reasons that the people in the store could not explain, since I only had 20 photos, but I couldn't download any new apps. So I couldn't even download the podcast app. So I'm not going to listen on my computer. I can't use it on my phone, and I don't actually know where my iPod is. So put all those things together and you have someone who's not listening to podcasts. And then I got a new phone, and right there on the main page was a little icon that said podcasts. And so I dove in, and boy, did I dive in. I feel like I've done nothing but listen to podcasts for the last 3 weeks. Serial was the first, and I kept hearing people rave about this. And like those people, I got totally sucked in. I listened to the whole thing in maybe less than 24 hours. I shushed my kids and walked around with headphones and waved people away and just binge listened to Serial, and then I came up for air and have not gone down that dark of a path again, but I have been listening a lot, whether it's at the gym or in my car or just kind of as I'm going about my day whenever there's a space, because with 4 kids, reading is really difficult, and I have been making myself read a lot more because I've missed that so much, and it's hard at this point to do it unless I make myself. But podcasts I found fit really neatly into my day in ways that a physical book doesn't. And also my kids are not going to eat a podcast, where they do eat my physical books if I leave them out. I have little kids, in case you're wondering, not monsters. So after listening to these podcasts, I was kind of in a place of creative, I don't know what, I'm just in an interesting place. Will talk more about this on my personal blog a little bit, which is kirstenoliphant.com. So the journey for creativity to me, I feel like a lot has happened in this past year. I took a course called Make Better in the fall, and I sort of accidentally stumbled upon it. I'm going to talk more about it in the second episode because I interview Blaine Hogan, who's the creator of that course, and I found myself taking it. I wasn't sure how I got there, and I wasn't sure what I was doing. And what it did for me was validate the sense in me that I need to be creating, that it's okay to be an adult, that it's okay to be a mom with 4 kids, and also want to make art, even if that art doesn't make any money, that it's enough that I do it, and that this is something that's inside of me. It's been inside of me since forever, and that's okay. That is a good thing. And so taking that course really kind of got my wheels turning. And then in December, my husband's dear mom died, and that we were all very, very close to her. And so that just sort of made me curl in a little bit in my life. I feel like I felt like I had to quit some of the things that I do and just kind of be home a little bit more. I wasn't depressed, but I was very sad, and I still am every day. You know, I just wish that I could call her and tell her about the things going on in my life, and I know that she would be excited for me. So that happened, and then in the beginning of February, I went to the IF conference, a local conference, which was where they videocast a conference that's in Austin with some really great speakers like Jen Hatmaker and Jenny Allen and Christine Kane, among a huge number of other women. And I went to that conference, and I saw these women up there, and I thought about my big dreams that I have. And then I heard Christine Kane talk about how everybody's sort of vying for this platform. There's not always going to be a platform, but there's always a place. There's a place to serve. And she talked about how she spent years serving just where there was an opening, and it wasn't anything glorious and it wasn't anything grand. And that really spoke to me, and I felt like there was this sense that I was chasing these dreams, that even though I do think God gave me this drive, that I was chasing after something and that I didn't need to be chasing. So I came home from that conference and thought, well, I feel validated in my creativity. I feel like I need to kind of curl in and be around my family because of this loss. And I feel like I need to stop chasing. And I had bought a ticket or bought a pass to a conference at the end of February called Rewrite in Austin, and it was a Christian writers conference. Now, I have to say, I hadn't been to a writers conference in years. I think the last one I went to was when I was in graduate school. I got my MFA from UNC Greensboro, and I went to AWP the last year that I was there. But since then, I've been to a lot of blogging conferences, but no writing conferences. And I certainly don't tend to find myself in the Christian writing world. But I'd heard about this conference in the fall. I really felt like I should go. And so I went. And while I was there, I sort of went in thinking that, I don't know, I just felt like this was sort of the end of the road for me. I wasn't sure why I was going. I felt like I needed to stop chasing things. I felt a little bit conflicted. And so many things happened. And I came out of the conference feeling inspired, feeling confirmed again, and feeling validated again. But not necessarily towards a specific thing, not necessarily that I needed to go finish that novel that's, 80% done, that I have trouble writing because I have 4 little children. It wasn't necessarily a specific thing, but one thing that happened at the conference is I started connecting with more and more writers and finding that because of the background I had in blogging and the training that I'd been doing and the things I've been doing in social media, not by any means that I'm huge, but just that I tended to have a good sense of how I could help other people who are just starting out with all this platform and all this stuff reach their goals in a specific way. And so I started having people approach me and started helping people with that. And then that sort of turned into this idea of, well, what else can I do to be involved in that? Because I certainly get a lot of fulfillment out of that, and I certainly can do that right now. And that sort of turned into starting a new blog. And then listening to all these podcasts, I started thinking about podcasts. And then I got an email from Blaine Hogan, who will be in the second episode again. He wanted to know if I was interested in doing a Q&A on my blog about Make Better. And that was the very day that I thought about starting a podcast. And so I emailed him back and I said, would you be interested in doing audio? Could I put it in a podcast? And he wrote back immediately and said, sure. And so there we went. And I took an afternoon and said, can I start a podcast in a week without knowing anything about it? And I found that there's enough information on the internet that yes, you can. And so that's where I came to be here. I made a list of people that I had some connections with that I thought would have something really valuable to offer in terms of either inspiring the passion to create or talking about practical tools and how to use them to get those creative words or projects in front of an audience. And I found that I had a really long list. And so I started emailing people and asking, would they be interested in being interviewed? And I haven't gotten a no yet. And so there we went, and here we are. So what this podcast is going to be is 2 things. Again, I want to deal with the inspiration. I want to help validate this idea that people are naturally creative. I think that's a very ingrained part of who we are, whether that's writing, which is my main thing, so there's going to be a lot dealing with that, or something totally different. I think that we are creative people. I think we are all creative in some way or another. And so I want to inspire and validate that in you. But I also think, especially in this world and where we are today in 2015, there is a very practical way that we can go about using the tools that we have in social media to get those words or those projects in front of an audience, if that's what you want. So if that's not what you want, then maybe you don't want to listen to the practical bits and you just want to write to your heart's content and come here for the inspiration. That's great. Or maybe you don't want the inspiration and you just want the practical tools. That's fine. If you're like me, you get excited about both, but I know I'm a little weird. So I think that these interviews will be a little bit more like conversations, loose interviews, more conversations. I'm a little bit goofy at times, a little bit awkward, so get excited for some goofy, awkward times. I want to go back a little bit into why I think it's important that we talk about people being creative. And I'm going to get a little Jesus-y here, and I should give this caveat that while I am a Christian, this is not what I would call a Christian podcast. That is the framework and the lens through which I see life and see so many things. So it will come out. And I am talking to some Christian people, but I'm definitely not inviting only Christian people on this podcast. And I definitely am not gearing the questions or interviews or anything else in that spiritual way. It will be there, I'm sure, at times. But if I'm ever going to get Jesus-y on you, I'll give you a little warning. And so that warning comes now. But I think the reason I feel like we are creative people goes back to the narrative in Genesis. And God spoke creation into being. He used words. He used language, is what the Bible says. And Jesus is even called the Word of God. Words were used in creation. And then God said, let us create man in our image. And so we are created in that image as creative beings, as beings who can create, whether that's with words or other things. But the very first job God gave man to do was to name the animals. Again, using words, using language as a form of work and as a form of, I think, art. We're reflecting the Creator by also being creative and using language in that way, which I find really, really fascinating. I wrote a book a few years ago, kind of a Bible study called There Is No Small Call. And it's all about calling and what that means in the Bible, because I think a lot of times we sort of think that calling has to be some super spiritually major type of thing, but I feel like that's not really what it means. That's a spoiler alert for the book. But one of the things I found when I went through and studied the Hebrew and the Greek with this Bible program, because I certainly don't know Hebrew or Greek, but they have great software now to do that kind of thing. And the very first time that the word call is used in the Bible in terms of vocation, it's when God called some men to be silversmiths and to create art for the tabernacle, which was sort of this, is before the temple, so it was like a giant tent where God's presence was housed, and it traveled with Israel until they came to rest in the promised land. And so the very first calling was not a missionary. It was not a pastor. The very first time the word call is used as a vocation is for silversmiths and art workers. And I think the first time I read that, it shocked me because, again, I think we imagine that word calling to be super spiritual. But I don't think it always is. It can be for sure, but I think there is equally a calling on us to create, whatever that is, whether you are a silversmith or a potter, or you're a musician or a songwriter, maybe you're a ghostwriter, maybe you build fences, which is something my husband does, or woodwork. I don't know what your form of creativity is. Maybe it's making great meals for your family. I think there are so many ways that this can come out. And yes, we will specifically be dealing with writing here, but I think there will also be inspiration for all of you, because I think this creativity is something that is innate in us. It was created in us, and it's a reflection of who God is. And I think that's really amazing. So whether the Bible or the Genesis narrative is something that you subscribe to, I want to just put that out there, that I think as human beings, we are innately creative. And I think that we are most whole, and we are at our best when we are fulfilling that creative drive in some way or another. I'm not going to tell you what that way is. We will be talking with songwriters. We will be talking with photographers. We will be talking with social media influencers, and also with some business people on the side of writing and other places. And I hope that the idea of creativity kind of lurks or hangs on, or maybe shines, actually. Shines probably better than lurks through all of these discussions and these conversations that we have. I hope that you, while you're listening, even now, feel that stirring to create. I hope you feel that validation, that you are here for a reason, and that creating, whether that's something that the world says is large or small, or whether your mom says it's large or small, or whoever that voice is sometimes. Maybe it's your own voice that tries to tell you that it's small. It isn't. Whatever that creative place is, it is important. It is valid, and you are a creative person. Okay, so that's about as excited as I could sound sitting alone in a room. But this is the end of my first podcast, and once a month or so, you'll be hearing from me, and I will be trying to sound as excited as I can alone in a room. But again, it should be easy. These are things I am excited about. I'm really glad that you're here. I hope that you subscribe. I hope that you also visit the website, createifwriting.com, and subscribe to the weekly email. I will be asking each of my guests if they have any kind of exclusive or freebie to offer, and I will be sharing that in the email. So you definitely want to be subscribed to that. And if you could leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you're listening, that would be fabulous, because that helps other people find my podcast, and also helps me to know what I need to do better. And I'm sure there are lots of those kinds of things, but be kind. So thank you so much for being here, and I hope you come back, and I hope you feel inspired to create.